Welcome to the Get Lipped Show, the only podcast where you get to meet your favorite fishing creators. I'm Spencer Murphy from Get Lipped Fishing, and if this is your first time with us, welcome. On this podcast, you'll get to meet great personalities, humble conservationists, die-hard fishermen, and future leaders of the fishing industry. If you enjoy fishing or the great outdoors in any way, this is for you. Well, hello there. Welcome to the Get Lipped Show. Yes, you heard right. I'm Spencer Murphy from Get Lipped Fishing, and it has been a while since I've recorded a podcast, and today there's no guest speaker. There's no tackle tips, really, specifically. There will be a little bit of tips at the end of this video slash episode slash podcast, and just thank you for joining me on today's episode. My wife and I have, since the last upload, moved to a new house. We're renting a home in hopes to save up for a home someday. The market where we live is insane, and everything is just so expensive. So it's really, it's tough to buy right now. So we're saving up, renting, and so that's why, one of the reasons I haven't uploaded a podcast. We've been moving, doing some crazy stuff. But on today's episode, I'm going to focus on the Get Lipped vlog. Episode 1, this is kind of the counterpart or brother or sister to that episode on YouTube. So if you haven't seen that episode, I would really encourage you to go ahead and go check that out. It's on the YouTube channel, Get Lipped Fishing. That's where you can find that, the most recent episode as of right now. So that episode, well, where to begin? Day 1, I went out with Susha. I went out on the bay boat, and our plan was to go catch some grouper, snapper, and this was actually filmed a couple months ago. It was still kind of in the cooler months. I believe it was like middle of March, early March. And it was actually before I filmed with Lawson Lindsay. So if you haven't seen either of those videos, or if you have, it was actually before I filmed with him. And in that video, I ended up catching my biggest grouper ever, which was insane. And Lawson caught his biggest grouper ever, which was pretty awesome too. So that was a great time. But this video was actually filmed, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks prior to filming that, maybe 1 or 2, but in that range. And so it wasn't quite warm yet. The water was still pretty dang cold. I think it was in the high 60s. And Sush and I went out. We got some pinfish, and we headed over to our favorite lit bridge, and we started dropping some pinfish down. And we fished probably for about, I'd say maybe 5 hours, 6 hours. I'd guess. And it was a tough night, just super tough night. I got the pinfish just in case the jig bite wasn't on or what have you. And so I'm throwing I'm throwing pinfish around, and Sush she doesn't have the patience like I do, because I've been fishing forever. And I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to not catch stuff. And so about halfway through the night, Sush was taking a break. She was chilling on her phone, taking a little nap. It's kind of late at night, it's like 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And I'm over there. I'm like, all right, I'm going to start throwing these pinfish. So I start throwing some pinfish out, and I get them on my hook. And I cast probably 3 pinfish in a row. And I even say this in the video. They all flew off the hook, or the second they hit the water, the hook came out. And I don't know what it is, but like lately, I've been having serious problems with this. And after like the 3rd or 4th one, I was just like, what the heck? And I was actually kind of starting to get a little mad and frustrated. And so literally the next pinfish I threw out, I just very gingerly tossed it to where I wanted it to land, and all was good. And unfortunately, we were kind of right on top of the structure. And you can see in the video, I also say, I'm like, shoot, we're right on top of it. And he just ate it and went right in. And so, I didn't know if it was a big or a small one. So the tactic I like to imply or like to use is go away from the structure, because I feel like the structure is kind of like a wall, and then it goes underneath. It's like a wall, like a square shape, and then underneath is this area. So if you're straight on top, they can very easily get under that square. I call it a juice box when I'm out there, when new people are fishing with me. And so I'm trying to get away from the juice box so I can get the correct angle to pull it out of the rock. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's not an exact science. So I get out to the middle of one of those little stalls, and under the bridge, and I've got the right angle where I think I can get him out. And I feel him still moving around. I'm like, okay, he's still on there. Cool. So I get him out of the rocks finally. It's like a 18-inch grouper, 17-inch grouper. So some of you, I don't know, that might be a good one. If you're on the East Coast, you guys don't get a lot of groupers, so that might be a cool one. But for around here, that's generally an under average size. That's a smaller one. And so I'm like, oh, what the heck? All right. And I'm recording, and Sush is like, why are you recording this? I actually put this fish second. This was the second fish we got, or the second fish in the video, first fish of the night. I put the bigger fish in first. She's like, why are you recording? And I'm like, because I want to get an episode. I'm filming. I'm trying to make a YouTube video. And she ended up being right. We only did catch one good fish. That next fish being that fish. And so I switched over to the jig. I was done with the pins after that. I was like, screw the finfish. They suck. And it's just so hard when you're using live bait, especially for grouper fishing in tight structure, or even snook fishing too. Something where it's tight structure and they can just get around the piling or a dock or in some rocks or something super easy. It's so difficult to use live bait to get those fish out. And that's a good reason to use lures. It's not the main reason I like using lures. I like using artificial just because it's more fun to me. You're tricking the fish into eating. And personally, it's more fun because the thump when those grouper and snook hit, when you're retrieving, you're either doing a steady retrieve really slow or you're bouncing it off the bottom and they just engulf your bait. And it's just the thump that you get from that is awesome. It's like hitting a train. There's like a train's grabbing your lure and just running like 1,000 miles an hour, or running into a wall is what I say a lot of times. It's like hitting a brick wall. And so that's the reason I like using lures. It's you're tricking them, you're hitting this wall. It's fun. Where was I going with that? So Sush is ragging on me. So I'm switching over to the lures because I enjoy doing that more. So I do that, and literally like, I don't know, 5-6 casts in, I hook in to this really nice gag. And I casted it out. I was letting it sink to the bottom because you got to be on the bottom to catch these fish most of the time. And it gets to the bottom. I'm walking up to the front of the boat. I close my bail. I start to reel down, and I feel this weight. And I'm like, oh, snap. I might have a fish on. So I start reeling, and there's a huge gag on, and I come tight, and it just starts ripping out some lines. So I have to cup the spool a little bit, put some more tension on there because my drag's completely locked, and he's taking drag out still. And so I get him out of the rocks, get him up. And that was the only fish we caught that night. It was probably like, I think if we measured it, it was like 26 inches. Really good grouper. I'll take that kind of grouper any night. And previously, before the Lawson video where I caught that 32-incher, that was pretty close to the biggest one I'd ever caught. I think 27.5 maybe. It was the biggest I caught before the Lawson vid. So the 26 I'm stoked. I'm like super happy. And Sush was like, man, I wish I could have caught that one. I bet you're really happy. And after that, the struggle with the pinfish. I'm sure you've been there where something's just not going right. I've been fishing for like 3 or 4 hours with no bites. The pinfish are flying off. I'm starting to get really down, and I'm like, what the heck? And I'm trying not to be because I'm super blessed to even be out there fishing and hanging out and not having to, do some kind of job at night or something. So I'm like trying to think positively, and then I'm like, yes, I got this fish. I'm super happy now. And even in the video, I'm like, yes, I'm so happy after not catching something for so long. And so overcoming the anger, overcoming the pinfish, that was the night one. But we only caught that one fish. Fast forward to about a week later, I believe, was the next time I had free. And I wanted to go out, and I was like, man, I didn't get a video. I haven't recorded anything in a little while. I call up my buddy Logan. And I think even actually we worked together. I think he was like, hey, we should go fish tonight. And I was like, it's going to be kind of windy. So in the video, I was like, who do I call? Logan. He's down to go and whatever. But really, it was me he called, I think. And I was kind of reluctant, and then we did end up going. And we got out there, and I didn't even show the first half of the night. The first half of the night was blowing so hard. It was ridiculous. And it was the night of a cold front, or right after a cold front. So the air temp was pretty dang cold. It was probably like 59. Water temp was really cold. We had just had that cold front and dropped the water temp probably another 4 or 5 degrees. So the water temp was pretty dang cold. The wind was cold. Everything was cold. I wore jeans, and I wore a long sleeve t-shirt, and I brought my windbreaker because it had been like 80 degrees the day before, 2 days before. So I was like, I probably won't even need the jacket. Was I wrong? I was so cold the entire night. So we're fishing this bridge, the first bridge, and nothing. We're seeing a couple tarpon free jump every once in a while. We didn't know it at the time. Like, what the heck is that? It sounds like a ray, but we didn't actually see one. And then finally, Logan and I, one of us saw it, and it was a tarpon. They were free jumping in the shadow lines there. And so, you know, obviously we're trying to catch those. That'd be awesome. But, you know, it's really early in the year still. The water's freezing. They're just kind of free jumping in random places. And there wasn't like a bunch were jumping. It was just every once in a while, a fish would jump and we'd be excited. And they were like, can we catch that? No, we can't. It's so windy that you can't cast in a straight line. If you want to cast in a straight line, you have to aim like 2 or 3 feet to the left and have your line swoop around. It was just crazy. So I hook into a fish on one of these casts, and I'm like, holy cow. I hook in, just dead weight. I rip the jig, I set the hook, and it's just dead weight. And I'm like, holy cow, this might be a nice snook, because it was on the bottom. And I get like a couple things that I feel like are head shakes. So I was like, oh yeah, sweet, it's an actual fish. Starts ripping out line towards one of the pilings. And I'm like, dude, this might be like a 38, 40-inch snook. This might be a giant. It wasn't running like a grouper. It was running like a snook, long, fast. And so I'm fighting it for a little bit. It's staying down. I feel a couple more head shakes. It finally takes a dart. And I hooked it really far away. I hooked it probably 50 yards away, 40 yards away. It starts darting at the boat and to the left. And I didn't put any of this in the video just because it's super windy and you can't see anything. And it finally comes up to the surface, and I see brown, and I'm like, oh no. And I'm saying in the video, I'm like, I hope it's not like a ray or something stupid. I always hook rays. And I see this brown shape, and I'm like, I think it's a ray. It ended up being a cow nose ray, just a tank cow nose ray, and I hooked him right, like, I don't even remember where I hooked it. I think I hooked it right in the middle of the fin. So a flap every once in a while could make it feel like a head shake. And that's exactly what it was. And I was super bummed. I was like, dang, I thought I just had a tank snook on. So that was kind of a bummer. Obviously, I didn't include that because it was, you know, such an upset to me. And then I got him off the hook. You know, he went off free. Didn't hurt him at all. He was fine. Then Logan, he's throwing this. I gave him a swim bait. He was pretty much throwing a swim bait the whole night in one form or another. He hooked into a nice snook. He got a snook up. I didn't show it because it was so dark. But he got probably a 28, 29-inch snook, and they were blowing up on the surface. He pitched one out, and he got hooked up right away. So that was cool. And then it kind of died off again. I did actually, I'm remembering now. I did catch a decent gag at the bridge there. It was just, it was dark. You couldn't see anything. I think I even forgot to hit record or something stupid like that. Struggles of YouTubing. It was probably a 24, 25-inch one. It was actually a pretty good one. But, you couldn't see it, or I didn't record it. I forget which it was. So we're basically just playing the waiting game at this first bridge and until the wind dies down so we can go to the big bridge, with all the lights and everything. And so the wind was supposed to die down around like 10 or 11, and it actually did. It was like 10, 15, something like that, and the wind finally died down. So I'm like, all right, let's make the run out there. We had, I don't think we had any live bait. We were just artificials. Yeah, just artificials. So we get over there, it's blowing, and it's my least favorite color at the bridge. It's red. And they were like red and white and changing back and forth, like shimmering. And so I was like, man, we got the dang candy cane colors. And in the video, you can hear Logan when he lands the first fish of that night on the episode. He's like, shimmer, shimmer, candy cane. We got the shimmer, shimmer, candy cane snook. And it was just, I hate that color because it doesn't light anything up. It was basically still dark. And I don't think the fish respond to it as well. They don't get on the light, and the bait doesn't collect as good on red light. I don't know what that has to do with. Maybe it's the red just, doesn't penetrate the water. I don't know. It's just not as bright as blue and white, which is what I really like. So we fished some of the rocks that are around there, and we basically, because of the wind, could only fish one side. So my thought process was, all right, we'll get in the lee, we'll get behind where the wind is, or where the wind isn't, I should say, and we'll just start throwing soft plastics and jigs and stuff along the rocks and bouncing the rocks and stuff. And so we start doing that, and I just keep getting short striked. I keep getting these short strikes. Short strike after short strike. And I'm like, what the heck? All right, these aren't snook. Generally, when that happens, it's a pinfish or on the flats, or it's a snapper. And we're not on the flats, and pinfish aren't going to eat 8-inch or 7-inch soft plastic. So I'm guessing it's decent snapper. And, you know, I've caught plenty of snapper here in the past. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to tie on one of these bad boys. I got it here. It's the X-Rap 12, size 12. Dives like 8 to 10 feet, something like that. And some of these rocks are in 8 to 12 feet of water. So I'm like, that's perfect. I'm just going to throw it along the rocks and try to get one of these little short striking turds to eat this treble hook, and he's going to get hooked. And Logan's like, we're going to hook him in the dome. And then literally, like, I think it was the first or second cast. I think it was second cast. Snapper, short strikes, got him. And I'm like, I don't know, it feels like a snapper. And it ended up being a snapper. And I was like, hey, Logan, you want this thing? It's a nice one. It was like, I don't know, 16 inches, 15, 16 inches, which is great inshore size and unartificial. Those things are so fun. And I was thinking, yes, I got him dialed in. I switched over to the twitch bait, the diving plug, and I'm just going to slay him now because they were short striking my swim bait like every cast. So I throw back out. I can't get another bite on the thing. And I stuck with it for a while, and Logan's over there in the meantime sticking with the swim bait. And I think he had this swim bait. It was either this or one very similar 6-7-inch swim bait. And for those of you that can't see, I was holding up a jig head and a swim bait. It's a 7-inch Z-Man swim bait, diesel minnow. And so he's throwing that thing, and he's like, dude, I'm getting short strikes over here. And he finally hooks into a good one, and this thing was a tank. It was taking out drag like it was a gag. And I was like, dude, you might have a grouper on. And nope, 20-inch snapper. And I was like, gosh, I'm throwing the X-Rap with the hooks. I'm thinking I'm doing it right. And just goes to show you, if you stick with something, eventually it might pay off. Maybe. And for him it did. So he got that 20-inch snapper, and you know, that went in the box as well. He had a little sleepover. And just a little side note, you'll hear me talk about in videos sometimes that I'm not going to keep a whole lot of fish, like even grouper. Redfish, trout, snook, I'm never pretty much ever keeping them. I've kept one snook in my entire life that I caught, and other ones that we have kept as just growing up as friends are ones that died. And this was back when, you know, you could actually keep them. You know, we fought them so long on light gear that they were just like, oh, in the heat of summer. Yeah, you know, whatever. Break. So to conclude this side note before I get off on a rabbit trail, I don't keep a lot of fish, and I really preach preservation and bringing up the next generation so they have fish to keep and they have, you know, fish to catch even. The population in our area has been in such a decline, even in my short time frame of fishing. My fishing career is so short compared to those older people that, you know, older guys that have been fishing their entire 40, 50, 60-year lives. And just in that short amount of time, I've seen such a decrease in the amount of fish, such a decrease in water quality. Grass has been dying in certain areas. Water is not as clear as it used to be, whatever. I just don't see the value. If you need food, you can get it from the grocery store. And I'm fine with keeping stuff. I'm fine with that. I know you can. But just be smart about it. So let me go full circle here. Get back. The snapper, there's so many snapper. The snapper population has exploded, it seems like, in recent years. And I think I don't know what it's due to, warmer water. Who knows? And I don't feel bad about keeping them. All right, now we're full circle. So we keep a couple of snapper. It's not a big deal. And these are big snappers, so you don't really need to keep that many to have a nice meal. You know, one of those 20-inch snapper will feed 2 or 3 people, maybe even 4 people if you're doing tacos with some rice and beans. Okay, back to the fishing. So I've kept a couple of snapper. Logan's sticking with the swim bait, and he's kind of roasting me right now. He's got 2 good ones in since I started throwing the X-Rap. And lo and behold, I stuck with the X-Rap, and it ended up getting me a nice fish. I hooked into something along the rocks, and I was like, oh, this might be a nice snapper. Thing jumps out of the water, and I was like, not a snapper. It was a snook. Not a bad trade-off. It was a nice snook. The nicest snook of the night. It was maybe 28 inches. And so I'm throwing that thing. I rip him in because I'm fishing really, really tight drag because of the grouper that can hit sometimes, and the snapper, you don't want them to get caught in the rocks. And, it was just a really nice snook. So I was super stoked to get that guy. And I think Logan hooked into a grouper next. It was one of those things where he just hit the bottom, got him on, broke him off, which brings me to my next point. Jig consumption. We probably lost 10 jigs, 10 jig heads and soft plastics, and a pack of Z-Man jig heads is $10. So that's at least 3 packs. So it's like $30 in jig heads. And Logan, I think, did the brute, or not the brute. He did the most breaking off. He did the grunt share. I don't know what that saying is. I'm really bad with sayings. Grunt share, lion's share. There it is. He did the lion's share of breaking off jigs, and he was kind enough to hook me up with some Venmo cash at the end because he lost so many. And it's just funny because when you're throwing jigs on rocks, it's going to happen. You're trying to bounce the bottom. You're trying to reel just above the rocks so that you're not in the rocks all the time getting stuck, but you have to be because that's where the fish generally are. And unless they're insanely fired up and coming up and eating on the surface or up and higher in the water column, then you can catch them anywhere. But in general, you want your bait, say the rocks are on the bottom, right? Obviously, you want your bait to be right above, just a couple inches, a foot. You want to be every once in a while bouncing off the rocks, which is, it's risky business. And so, yeah, lost a bunch of jigs. And, that's just kind of the name of the game. If you want to catch snook consistently, grouper, snapper, depending on your area, this is basically a west and east coast snook tactic, and it works for tarpon too. You got to be in contact with the bottom. You got to hit the bottom and drag it just above the bottom. A lot of guys on the East Coast I'll see fishing, because I've been over there a bunch of times, just fishing from land, and they just reel. They cast it out, and they let it hit the bottom, and then they reel. There's no action. They catch fish. But on the West Coast, that works too, but not as well, I think, as jigging it. I like to give it a little bit of action. Cast it out, let it hit the bottom, and I bounce, and I bounce, and I bounce, and I bounce. And you're bouncing the bottom, and you're creating that vibration. I think that's what the snook like. That's the grouper like. And especially in heavier current situations, I think you need that thump to get their attention. And I could be totally wrong, and I could just be, it could all just be made up. But I feel like that's what gets the more bites over the longevity of a night. And so if you want to catch more fish, you're going to have to lose some jigs. You're going to have to be in contact with the bottom, and you're going to have to break off a lot over and over, and you're not going to be happy. I can assure you of that. Working in the tackle store over, the 7 years, I'd say the past probably 5 or 6 years, there has been an insane amount of growth in that type of fishery. We have a college really close to our store, and there's just an insane amount of kids that love fishing. They love it. They're ate up with it. And that's the only thing they do. They go out at night, they hit all the bridges, they hit all the inlets, and they're dragging the bottom with jigs, soft plastics, bucktail jigs, snook jigs. And, they're losing sometimes 15 jigs in a period of 5 or 6 hours. It can happen. There's crab traps in some of these passes. There's just a lot of treacherous area. So if you want to do this type of fishing, it's unfortunately expensive. It's unfortunate that it is that expensive. You have to, and that's why a lot of people throw the bucktails, is because they're cheap. They're $2.50 a piece, which isn't cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than buying a $3 jig head and a $3 soft plastic or $4 soft plastic, and then you're out $7, $6 every time you lose something, which sucks. And the spool techs, don't even get me started. There's $22 every time you lose one of those. So day 1 and 2. Grouper fishing, snapper fishing. I'm going to wrap up with, I guess, the tactics I was doing. I kind of just did, really. Tactics were throwing jigs, losing them, figuring out what the heck's short striking, switching over to an X-Wrap. And sometimes that's just all it takes. If you're getting short strikes, like obviously it's not a grouper. All right, what do I need to do to change that up? I switched over to something with treble hooks on it, and I got the bites, and it worked for a little bit. And I even caught a snook, but Logan stuck with a swim bait, and he was getting short strikes over and over and not getting hooked up. But eventually, he did get that bigger, that higher caliber fish to eat, and it paid off in the end. So that's all I have for you guys today for this episode 1 of the Get Lipped vlog, if you will. This is kind of the behind the scenes look at a day filming and fishing on the water. I guess I kind of went over the weather, but the tide, when Sush and I were fishing, it was ripping, it was ripping out, it was going out. I believe it was going out anyway, but either way, it was ripping. So when it's ripping, I like to throw jigs a lot. This is a little secret. I like to throw jigs a lot when it's ripping, and it might not be a secret to some. And when the current is slower, I like to throw live bait. It seems to be more productive. When the current is ripping, you can't keep a bait in, and this is basically just common sense. When you're out there fishing, you kind of realize when the current is ripping a ridiculous amount, you can't get a pinfish down there. You're not going to use 6 ounces of lead to hold a pinfish in place for a grouper. I'm not. You might, and it probably works. And if you get the bait in front of that fish, he'll probably eat. The fish are hunkered down when the tide is ripping. I think they're closer to the structure. If something comes by, they grab it. And I don't like that style of fishing. So if I have to use a whole bunch of weight, it's too much like dropping something down offshore, which isn't that fun to me either. Unless it's like throwing jigs for grouper or jigs for amberjack or something. Side note. So fast water, I'm throwing jigs. Slower water, jigs will still work. You can lighten up your jig head, but pinfish are the killer, or some type of live bait. All right, that's going to wrap up episode 1 of the Get Lipped vlog. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. I'm going to do more of this stuff. Even if it's not a Get Lipped vlog, I'll probably either include it in the next vlog or I'll just make a podcast about that fishing day to try to kind of give you a little bit more of the behind the scenes of the stuff that didn't make it on the camera, like the cow nose ray. I'm such a cow nose slayer. I'm always hooking those. And the snook, when that were in super dark areas that you couldn't even see. So I was like, I'm not even going to try to include it. So leave a comment if you enjoyed this podcast, this Get Lipped vlog. I hope to see you all on YouTube as well and in the next Get Lipped vlog. I appreciate you guys for joining me and tuning in, and I hope you guys have a great day. Peace.